All right, so thank you for tuning in and chomping at the bit. I'm Kyle Letters, of course. Now, this episode, we'll talk about the NBA. I was planning on taking a little bit of break from the NBA because I thought once the offseason got underway, there'd be a little bit of a kind of a quiet period between the start of free agency and then between we start getting a lot of these moves happening. Well, that didn't happen at all because we heard about moves before free agency officially started, and then once a free agency got going, like a whole slew of moves happened. So, there's only natural I'm going to talk about some of the moves that I've seen so far. Some of them I like. There's a couple others that, make me scratch my head a little bit. But there's one thing you can say about the NBA is that their offseason, at least the past few, unpredictable and wildly active. So go ahead, get into some of that, and also we'll take a look at some of the players that are still available to see if there's any big names there. And even with all the moves that have happened so far, there are still a couple of players that we're waiting to see what's going to happen with them. So if the first 2 days or so of free agency are any indication of how this free agency period is going to go, the NBA is probably going to be in the news for a while now. And I'm not against that. Got to fill the gap between now and football season. So I'm here for it. But let's go ahead, jump into some of these moves and see what I like and what I don't like. All right, so the moves kind of came quickly, like I said. And some of the bigger ones that I've liked so far, I don't know if I've liked this one yet, but Danny Ainge, who's now in Utah, I believe he's the GM or assistant he's something out there. He's in the front office. And what do we know about Danny Ainge? He's not afraid to make big moves with big names, and he's done that already. So he's sending Rudy Gobert out, which, if you remember, I talked about at the end of the NBA season, Utah had to do something. The Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert dynamic kind of has worn its welcome, and you can see that there's a clear ceiling with those two. Basically not championship quality. So I assume they were going to either move one or both, but if they're only going to move one, it'd be Rudy Gobert, and that's what Danny Ainge did. He's going to the Timberwolves, which now creates a front court where you have Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert in it. I will be interested to see what that looks like, because I do think at times Karl-Anthony Towns can be too perimeter happy. I just hope that with Gobert now on the court with him, it doesn't force him out on the perimeter even more, and he feels like he needs to stay out there. Hopefully they can find that balance, because this could work out for Minnesota if they are able to. If not, this may be a move that we look back on in a couple of years and wonder, was it the right move or not? Utah it's basically like a salary dump, if you want to put it that way. Utah's getting some pieces back. They're getting Patrick Beverley, who, if you remember the play-in tournament when they won that game or whatever, and all the emotion that Patrick Beverley was pouring out and all that, to now get dealt away, that could be a blow to him, but we know Patrick Beverley is... he'll probably just do the same in Utah. That's if he stays there. We'll have to see. Maybe he gets moved again. I don't know. But they do get Malik Beasley. That's a good piece to, start the rebuild, retool, whatever Danny Ainge wants to call it. But now all eyes are going to be on Donovan Mitchell to see, does Danny Ainge, complete the teardown and move Donovan Mitchell now? Or does he try to convince Mitchell to stay and get other pieces around him to make him feel like it's worth staying there? Because yes, Mitchell is under contract, but as we've seen, when these big name players feel like their current situation isn't good enough for them, then they can publicly make it known that they want out. So Danny Ainge has a lot to figure out here. We'll have to see if Utah makes another move in the next coming days of free agency, because there's still names out there. And as we know, with any club, you make a right offer, for the most part, they'll part ways with a lot of people on their roster. So there could be somebody that we're not even thinking of that Danny Ainge could somehow figure out a way to get him to Utah to pair with Mitchell. But that's something to watch going forward. What was another move that I liked? I mean, I think we already knew about this one because we heard about it. But John Wall gets bought out. He decides to go to the Clippers, and he's going there. I think it's 2 years, $13 million. So it's not big money. Which, I mean, John Wall's made a bunch of money not really playing the past few years. So this clearly looks like a move where he's trying to win something now. And the Clippers have an interesting roster that they're building up right now, because now, you know, they started off Kawhi and PG, Paul George, for those of you who don't know. But now you're bringing in John Wall. Yes, those are three guys who have had recent injury issues. But and for John Wall's career, last few years, you probably heard that word a lot, but if John Wall can come in, be healthy, if Kawhi comes back from his injury, looks like the same player. Paul George, we saw come back from his injury last season, and he played well down the stretch. So if those three can all be on the court at the same time, now you know that Ty Lue's going to have to do some load management with all three of them throughout the season. But those three could be formidable in a Western Conference that isn't necessarily as deep as the East is right now, because you're looking at Phoenix, who had that meltdown last year, so we don't know what they're gonna. I mean, we assume they'll be towards the top of the West. So you got them, you got Golden State, reigning champions. You have Denver, who has their own ifs as well, but you have Denver, you have Memphis. Utah's completely ripped it apart, so you don't have to really worry about them, at least yet. But right there, you got the Clippers slip into that group. I know Vegas loves the Lakers, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit later, maybe. But if Vegas is right and the Lakers have a bounce back from last year, you put them in that group. That's kind of where you are at the West. Minnesota, we'll have to see like I said before, the Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns fit, but that's kind of where you start. After that, you're probably reaching a little bit for some Western Conference teams. Of course, there can be a team that's going to surprise and move up. That's not out of the question. But right now, with those three on the Clippers, you'd have to put them in the top contenders pool of the Western Conference. So the Clippers could be wildly exciting to watch next year. Once again, that's if health is not a problem. And we have to see for them with their others and their bench guys, do they lose any of them? If not, they should be fine. Let me see here. Zach LaVine, who, if you remember, I think it was LeVar Ball said like a few months ago that he thought Zach LaVine was going to the Lakers, which I believe I said on here before. I don't pay attention to LeVar Ball. I knew he didn't know what he was talking about. Clearly, he didn't know. At least, well, I mean, I guess there's still a possibility maybe he gets traded there. I doubt it, but you know. So, Zach LaVine gets his max deal to stay in Chicago. mean, he was there in Chicago last year. Chicago did have injury issues last year. Chicago is a team that people are going to watch going into next year to see if they can kind of break into the top half of the East, because they have talent on that team, but they as well have their own ifs. If Lonzo Ball can defy odds and make it through a season healthy, he hasn't really done that yet, but if Alex Caruso got hurt last year, but he came back. DeRozan's going to be another year older, and DeRozan's older than you probably think. I think DeRozan's got to be like 30. Isn't DeRozan like mid-30s at this point, I think? But LaVine is definitely going to be a big part of how successful they have in terms of wins and losses next year. And for this kind of money, 5 years, $215 plus, I mean, he's going to have to shoulder a lot of the load. That means when they go through losing streaks, he's going to be the guy that they're looking at. And then now there's going to be a lot of pressure amongst the fans of Chicago for him to deliver a winner there. All in all, I mean, Zach LaVine is talented. Of course, he's not the perfect player, but I think this is the move that Chicago needed to make. So I have no problem with that one. Otto Porter goes to Toronto. So he gets his ring with Golden State, bounces out to Toronto, and I guess he pretty much fits into the Raptors roster of like 6'9" and under guys, because they don't have any real legit big men. But I mean, you put Porter on the court with Siakam, Barnes, Anunoby. Fred VanVleet's the only small guy, but that's a lot of length, a lot of potential defensively, just not a lot of inside presence defensively. So that could be where they get attacked. And well, let's see. I kind of assume Toronto's not done making moves, but I like Porter going there. I think that's a good move for them. And they got him on a 2-year deal. I guess we talk about the Knicks, because the Knicks, they were busy. I don't know if it's the good type of busy though, because they got an agreement with Mitchell Robinson, 4 years, $60 million. Not big money. He's a guy who has his own injury concerns, I guess, but he's a talented big man. And for, a Thibodeau-led team, sure, yeah, Thibodeau's still a coach there. Great signing because need a rim protector. Then they made the move that was seen as kind of the move of the day up until a few moves later. But we'd heard about they wanted Jalen Brunson for a while. They were enamored with him. They got it done. So 4 years, like 104, 105 million. And that's probably the first move that made me scratch my head. I get it. Jalen Brunson was the hot name coming out of last year, but that seems like a lot to give to a guy based off of a couple of playoff games. And that's about it. Because, yes, he got a lot of attention when, Doncic didn't play and Brunson had a couple of good games. I think that's a large leap to go from that to now like $25 million. And he's going into New York. He's going to have to be the man now. But if you look at the Knicks have other problems they need to figure out. Because I don't care who you bring in. If Julius Randle is going to continue to play the way that he does, the Knicks aren't going to go anywhere. I've said this before that I think the Knicks should move Randle. I don't know if they can at this point. So if they can't, they're going to have to get somebody to get into his head, convince him to play differently, Because if you've seen any Knicks games, their offense is basically, if the ball's swinging around, the minute it gets to Randall, everything dies at that point. Because then it just turns into Randall pounding the ball, trying to fake out his defender. I mean, he doesn't have the best handles. He's not exactly the quickest guy, but he tries the same moves possession after possession, and it usually leads to him taking a tough jump shot. Because like I said, he's not quick enough to get around a lot of guys, so he's usually taking a lot of fadeaways. And bringing Brunson into that environment where now you have Brunson, you have Derrick Rose, who plays the same position, mind you. But I guess Rose can come off the bench because he's kind of been doing that for a while now. You have R.J. Barrett. You have... So I guess their starting lineup would be what? Mitchell Robinson at the 5. I guess Randall at the 4. But Barrett at the 3. Fournier at the 2. Brunson as your point guard. I don't see how that team's any better next year than they were this past year. So, I mean, the Brunson deal just screams of desperation from an organization in the Knicks that has been burnt some of these off seasons where they went big fish hunting and completely missed out. So they targeted Brunson. They got him. I mean, his what I think his dad is like an assistant coach of the Knicks, and I think the owner's related to Brunson too or something. So I don't know. Knicks fans, you'd have to let me know. I think this is a move that has the potential to blow up in the Knicks' face, but obviously I'm not, hoping that Brunson completely fails in New York. It's just that there's no faith when it comes to the Knicks front office right now. So bringing in Brunson and Robinson, that doesn't answer all of their issues, and I just don't know if they'll be able to plug the other holes, with the biggest one being Randall. He's the biggest issue. If Randall's the best player on your team, you're not winning anything. It's been proven, unless you haven't been paying attention. I said Otto Porter leaving Golden State. Gary Payton is now leaving Golden State. He's going to the Blazers. Blazers are another team where not really sure what they're doing right now, but we know that Damian Lillard put out that post about Kevin Durant being in Portland, which, I mean, I guess I'll talk about that in a little bit, but Golden State losing another key piece to a championship team, that's a good get for the Blazers, but we'll have to see what other moves come with that before I consider Portland to be some type of, contender or team to really worry about yet. Zion got his max from the Pelicans. Kind of assumed that was going to happen, but yeah. Then outside of that, I think the biggest things were the Celtics and the situation in Brooklyn. So I'll talk about the situation in Brooklyn first. I kind of want to end it with the Celtics because, once again, Celtics fan here, end the show with them. So the Brooklyn situation, if you haven't been paying attention, has been, I guess, the talk of the NBA world because, one, after this past year, they were in the news constantly, James Harden going there, leaving, Ben Simmons going there, not playing, Kyrie and his sideshow, and then Durant, who, yes, he dealt with injuries last year, but he was kind of the only consistent player Brooklyn could depend on last year. Well, shortly after basically finding out, Kyrie's going back there, we learned that Durant has requested a trade. So imagine this: 3 years. I think it's been like 3 years or something. Brooklyn goes out, gets Kyrie, KD, and now in a short term, 3 years, neither of those guys could be on the team, as well as Harden, who they brought in to fill out the big three with those two. And you have to look at it as Brooklyn once again has failed in whatever this process that you want to call it, whatever the end game was supposed to be. They fell so far short of it that Brooklyn is now kind of being laughed at this point. If you don't remember, there was the whole thing some years ago with the Celtics, and everybody said Danny Ainge completely fleeced them on a deal. And that's the one where they got an aging KG, aging Paul Pierce, and they won nothing with those two, completely bottomed out, and the Celtics got a bunch of high draft picks out of it. Well, now they built up another squad and they got nothing for it. The best that they did was, I think, the second round. Yeah, because I don't think they made a conference finals. They definitely didn't make the finals, which means they didn't win a ring. When you had Kyrie Irving, who people tell you is the most talented point guard they've ever seen, and you have Kevin Durant, who's probably the most lethal offensive player that we've seen in a while, I'll say. And somehow they couldn't manage to put it together to accomplish anything. But anyway, fast forward the story. So Kyrie Irving opts in, but he basically opts in because he's upset that he couldn't get a longer term deal. So he's been telling people he's going to end up in LA with the Lakers. And then Durant demands a trade, I guess because Kyrie didn't get big money. So he sees it as the organization isn't taking care of Kyrie. And remember, Durant left Golden State to go to Brooklyn for Kyrie. So now Durant's offended. He wants out. And then the craziest part of the story was, I think it was Wojnarowski who said that the idea of Durant and Kyrie playing together isn't off the table. So if possible, they would like to go somewhere together, which is stupid to me and something that probably can't happen and something that Brooklyn shouldn't feel obligated to do. But you have Kyrie wanting to be in LA to get back with LeBron, because we know that's when he's had his most success with LeBron, because he was with him before, one ring, blah, blah, blah. Got sick of LeBron, wanted his own team, then realized he's not the type to have his own team because he's not a great leader. He's not a great locker room guy. He's quite the opposite. He's one of those who is divisive and splits locker rooms, and teams get tired of him pretty quickly. So for all the talent, he's still a guy that a lot of teams are staying away from. Then again, if you think about it, the Lakers could take on anybody at this point because their past season was a complete disaster and they got to fix that. So will Kyrie end up out there? I kind of doubt it because I don't know what the Lakers could offer Brooklyn to justify sending Kyrie out there, because everybody's talking about Westbrook, which Westbrook isn't the headache that Kyrie is, but I'm sure there's questions going around of Westbrook's ability at this point. Even though I am a Westbrook fan, I just like the fact that he goes 100% all the time, but we know his deficiencies. So that is what it is. The Durant thing, I guess, isn't that surprising because we've seen him leave teams before. And we know how sensitive and all that Durant is to media criticism and all that. But then the craziest thing, because for people who try to defend Durant and I guess whatever, he comes out with a list of teams he wants to go to, and the top 2 teams on his list are Phoenix and Miami. So the 2 number 1 seeds from last year, that's where he wants to go. So this kind of seems like he's trying to recreate the Golden State thing all over again, except Golden State, at least for now, isn't trying to get him back. So he picks the 2 number 1 seeds as a place to go. Problem is, I don't see how those 2 teams put together a package that makes sense for Brooklyn. And if I'm Brooklyn, I'm going to trade Kevin Durant. I'm not going to trade him in the East. At least that's what I would. That's the way I would go about it. So that would take Miami off the table. And then if I'm going to trade with Phoenix, what am I getting in return? Booker, who's another guy who got his big money with an extension. And also Jokic did. I didn't want to get through this episode without mentioning that Jokic got big money. And I mean, 2-time MVP. We know the talent's there. No problem with that. But yeah, so Durant wants to go to Phoenix. They can't take Booker on because I don't know how many of you know about this, but this is something that I learned, that there's like some NBA rule that there's certain players, it's like guys on rookie deals, you're not allowed to trade for one of them if you have one on your team or something like that. Or guys who just got an extension off of their rookie deal. It's some weird thing. So for the fact that they have Ben Simmons on the team, they technically can't trade for Devin Booker anyway. So, I mean, Ben Simmons gets there, doesn't play, and now he's even hindering that. But, so if you can't get Booker, you're not going to want Chris Paul at this point, because Chris Paul, I mean, isn't reliable in the playoffs, is older. So are you going to make a package with Mikal Bridges? Do you do sign and trade with DeAndre Ayton? I guess a bunch of picks, but I don't know. So the Durant thing, I doubt that gets resolved anytime soon. Because one, Durant's got to be open to go to other places, which I think there's other teams on the list. I think like the Celtics are on the list, which as a Celtics fan, I'm good on the Durant thing because I feel like if one, it'd be crazy for Brooklyn to trade Durant within the division, much less in the East. But if they were going to, they're going to want like Jaylen Brown, Grant Williams, bunch of picks. They'd probably want, I don't know, they'd probably want everybody outside of Tatum because we know Boston wouldn't trade Tatum. Now, the good thing is, it was already put out there that Boston has zero interest in trading Jaylen Brown, which thankfully is the position they should take, because I think it'd be stupid to trade Jaylen Brown at this point, especially for a Kevin Durant who's about to be 34, I think. And I don't have any doubt that Durant's going to age well going into his late 30s, but we don't know. So Brooklyn could kind of be stuck here. Now, the one thing on Brooklyn's side is that Durant has 4 years left on his deal, so if they can't move him, then Durant's kind of forced to play there, which I think he would, because Durant doesn't come across as a guy who's one of those who can't get his way, will just completely shut down and not play. So that's going to be interesting to watch. I think the Kyrie aspect, I think at this point Brooklyn would love to get away from that guy. It's just questions are, how do they do it? So that's something to watch as we go into free agency. Some other quick things before I finish with the Celtics here. We learned that Harden opted out of his deal, but plans on going back to Philadelphia on a friendlier contract, as we'll put it. We'll have to see what that looks like. They did get PJ Tucker They stole him away from Miami. I do think some of this narrative and hype around PJ Tucker is a little overblown, because people are making it out to be like PJ Tucker is this guaranteed championship type guy. I mean, is he valuable? Yes, but I think some of that needs to calm down just a little bit. But so now let's get to my Celtics to end this episode here. There was a lot of questions about Brad Stevens when he moved from the coaching role to the GM role, and I gotta say, if he was reluctant to do it at first, he seems like a natural at this thing. Last year, there was all the talk about splitting up the Jays. He refused to do that. He went ahead and added to the team, getting Horford back and Derek White. Then shipped out a bunch of guys who were taking up space, kind of a bigger headache than needed for a first-time coach in Udoka, who he brought in. And look what that did. So then he gets to the offseason. Some people could have been like, hey, we'll run it back. We were 2 games away from winning the title. Brad Stevens let us know that he wasn't going to do that, because at the end of the season, he said the team needed playmaking and bench depth, because what hurt the Celtics in the finals, as the finals went on, some of those guys who were dependable on the bench during the regular season and early in the playoffs fell off a bit, and the production wasn't there anymore. So what does he do? We heard about the DeJounte Murray to the Hawks deal, and Gallinari going out, gets bought out. He goes, gets Gallinari. Now, being in Atlanta, I've seen Gallinari on the Hawks. I didn't necessarily like the fit with him on the Hawks teams, because they had him in a position where they depended on him like he was the number 3 option on certain nights. I don't think that's the kind of guy he is at this point. So with the Celtics, he's going to be a guy who can come in off the bench, space the floor. He's a career 39% three-point shooter. So when Tatum and Brown get to the rim, kick it out, he's a guy that they can depend on to knock down an open 3 on a consistent basis. So I love that fit. Then some time passed, we wondered, what else is Brad going to do? And then he pulls off a move that I didn't see coming. He gets with the Pacers and pries away Malcolm Brogdon, who's a guy that a lot of Celtics fans and Celtics media have been looking at for the past few years. Now Brogdon comes in with injury concerns somewhat, but I think by him coming into Boston, he's not now the guy that he was in Indiana, because Indiana, a lot was on his shoulders to initiate offense, to score and all that as a starter, because Indiana was a flawed team at that point. But in Boston, he can come in, late game situations. You can have him out on the floor to be a guy to initiate the offense, because during the finals, you could see that take a toll on Brown and Tatum. And that's where a lot of the turnover issues happened. Brogdon can come in and solve that. Brogdon gives Marcus Smart some relief, because yes, Marcus Smart played point guard, was good at point guard. Quick side note, I've seen a lot of people talking about this is a move that's like a slap in the face to Marcus Smart and kind of lets him know that he didn't do his job. I think that's crazy. Marcus Smart was a great point guard last year. I've said this for years, and it still holds true to today. Where Marcus Smart is best is that if there's people on the court that are playing well, knocking out shots, Marcus Smart's great, because he has no problem facilitating all that. Where the issue comes is when guys come in and they're off, they're not making shots and all that. Then Marcus Smart feels like it's on him to do that, and that's where you get those games where he takes 20 shots, taking like 10 threes. So now bringing in Gallinari, Brogdon, those are 2 guys who, if they're on the court with him and the Jays, or him and one of the Jays and Horford, or him, Robert Williams, Horford, and one of the Jays, he has no problem letting those guys get theirs. So I think it's a brilliant move. And with Brogdon's injury concerns, you can, dial back his minutes. But with him and Gallinari there, you can dial back Tatum's minutes. You can dial back Brown's minutes, because you still have Derek White. You still have Payton Pritchard. You still have Grant Williams. So Brad Stevens was able to get Brogdon. I mean, he got Gallinari for nothing because Gallinari is a free agent. But you get Brogdon, and he then deal away anybody within the top 8 of the rotation from the finals team. Now you're adding these two guys. The Celtics are now 10 deep. And that also gives way to, J.D. Davison maybe being on the roster. But I feel like he'll be in Maine. And Travion Williams, who I talked about some episodes ago, maybe this opens up a spot for him if he does well in the Summer League to be that big man piece that a lot of people think the Celtics need to find in free agency. So maybe they have the guy in-house. We'll have to see. But it opens up space for those guys to get on the game day roster now. And all in all, I just like what Brad Stevens has done so far in his time as the GM. And it's got me excited for next season to see how Brogdon and Gallinari fit in with the group now. But yeah, I think that's about it. So, like I said, the Brooklyn situation is still something we have to watch. Philly, we have to watch that to see what kind of money Harden comes back on, and what exactly does that mean in terms of them making other moves. And let me see what else. Oh yeah, one last thing. More on a serious note here. Miles Bridges. I don't know if you've seen the story or understand what's going on, but if there was an award for stupidity or whatever you want to call it, Miles Bridges gets that unopposed. So the day before free agency is about to begin, when Miles Bridges is one of those guys who's supposed to get big money in this offseason, because we've seen money being kicked around, he gets arrested on the domestic violence charge or whatever. And I was looking into the story, and if it's all true, because you have to say allegedly at this point until whatever, but based off what I think it's his wife, girlfriend, I don't know, based off what she's saying and the pictures that were attached to the story, if it's all true, Bridges may not play another game in the NBA. I'm just going to put it that way, because it's some shocking details in that story. Once again, if you haven't seen it or heard about it, look it up. You'll be amazed at what's been going on. And so at this point, like I said, Miles Bridges was a guy coming into this offseason that a lot of teams I think would have loved to have had. But with this story coming out, I feel like no team should touch him at this point, because if you're going to go ahead and allegedly, like I said, do that, then you have no business being in the NBA. That's clear cut to me, because, as any commissioner would say, it's a privilege to be in their league, and to make that kind of money is not anybody's right to do that. So if Bridges, once again, allegedly did that and wants to throw his career away, that is on him. Now, of course, you would want him to get back on his feet or whatever. Just can't be in the NBA. That'd be a terrible look for the league. And if there's one thing we know about these owners, it's They want to maintain good standing with the public because those are the ones who pay all the money. So, once again, if it is all true, it's a tragic story for Miles Bridges because he was a guy who showed a lot of talent, but that talent doesn't work in this situation. So I just wanted to say that to end out this episode. Well, before I close out the episode, because I think it needed to be said, because it's crazy to me how some of these athletes can put themselves in that situation and completely derail the direction of their career. Because like I said, Miles Bridges was clearly on the uptick. You know, Charlotte was an up-and-coming team, I guess you could say. But that's another story I will be paying attention to see what happens with that. Because like I said, check out the story. There's probably pictures attached to it from the claims of the wife, girlfriend. I can't remember what she was, but yeah. And I even think the kids, I don't know. It's a crazy story, but check that out. But yeah, so with that, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, share. And trying to see, pretty sure I didn't miss anything. But thanks again. If this was your first episode, appreciate you stopping by, and hopefully check out some past episodes. Stick around, leave a review, comment, whatever. Oh, one more thing. I mentioned this on the last episode. I'm trying to do weekly, or probably every other week, I'll dedicate a day to kind of a fun topic that is sports related, of course, while I'll do a top 5 list of whatever that you can come up with. Of course, if I don't get any suggestions, I'll kind of come up with one on my own, because I did say I will start with my top 5 sports movies, so kind of give you an idea of what I'm looking for here. But if you do want to, I guess, submit a request, you can follow me on Twitter at Chompin' Podcast. Let me know there. I guess you could put it into your comment or review wherever you are listening to this podcast. You can do that as well. And if I choose your suggestion, I'll shout you out on the episode, of course. So hopefully, come with some good ones, because I do have some I can kind of start with. But once again, if you guys come with suggestions, I would obviously love to use one of yours. But yeah, so if you can do that, greatly appreciated, as well as like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. So thanks again. And as I say at the end of every episode, be safe out there. God bless. And I'll catch you on the next episode. All right. Have a good one. I'm out.